Hello, it's Charlotte, and it's been 2 months since I last uploaded, and it's finally spring here in where I live. And I want to talk about the books that I read in August. It just got light all of a sudden because the sun is setting. Alright, the first book I read last month was a 5-star, and it's 色彩を持たない田崎作と彼の巡礼の年. And I had to read the book title in Japanese because it's a sing not to. There's nothing wrong with the English translation, but Japanese is a subtle and delicate language, which makes the original book title more, exquisite in comparison. And I like to spend some time talking about the book title. The English title is Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. So this entire expression is translated into one single English word, which is colorless. And that is correct, but some nuance is lost here. In Japanese, the most common expression for colorless is iro no nai. Iro means color, and nai means no or not. Essentially, it's a negation. For example, in BTS song Your Eyes Tell, there's a line that goes Kimi no inai mirai wa iro no nai sekai, which means a future without you is a world without color. However, instead of iro, Murakami used shikisai, and that's a more literary way of putting the word color, and it carries a more nuanced and artistic connotation. Unfortunately, in English, we don't have an equivalent for that word. The closest we have is color. And then instead of nai, Murakami used motanai. So motsu means to have something, and motanai naturally becomes to not have something. So literally, shikisai motanai Tazaki tsukuru means tsukuru Tazaki, who does not have color. And it's a curious expression because why does he not have any color? And what does it even mean to not have any color in the first place? Does that mean his life is really dull? And if that were the case, surely Murakami would have chosen a different title. Because again, you would never use an elaborate expression like shikisai motanai when all you want to say is iro no nai. So I was really interested, and I learned about the book title back in 2012, which was a year before the book was published. So I was like, okay, I need to read some Murakami. And I remembered my mom had Norwegian Wood on her bookshelf, so I asked her if I could borrow it. And she was like so appalled because I was like 13 at that time. And she was like, what made you want to read that book? It's totally inappropriate for your age. And I was like, okay, not reading. And I ended up reading Norwegian Wood when I was like 18. But anyways, let's move on to the name of the protagonist, which is Tazaki Tsukuru. So Tazaki is his surname and Tsukuru is his name. So Tazaki is in kanji or Chinese characters and Tsukuru is in hiragana. And the thing with Japanese names, especially their first names, is that there can be many different ways to write it, but their pronunciations are all the same. So for example, the name Tsukuru can be written as these, like these are all Tsukuru, but which one is it for our protagonist, right? And the same is true for Haruki, which is Murakami's name. Like these are all pronounced Haruki. And each kanji or Chinese character has a different meaning. So when you get to know the way to write a person's name, it's like you're getting a more definite picture of what kind of person they are. With Tsukuru's name, because it's written in hiragana in the book title, it's quite nebulous, isn't it? And if his name is truly just Tsukuru with no corresponding kanji, then that's a pretty boring name, isn't it? Maybe that name is representative of his life and maybe his life is dull. Maybe he really does not have color. Whatever that means. And then the rest of title, Kare no Junren no Toshi, that's pretty accurate. It just means his years of pilgrimage. And yeah, and the title basically tells you everything that you can expect from the story. A seemingly ordinary Tazaki Tsukuru embarks on a spiritual journey. The plot is quite simple. We follow Tsukuru, who's 35 now, and for 15 years he has been haunted by a painful memory. That one day he got a call from his group of 5 friends, including himself, that he was no longer part of it, and they didn't tell him why. Because Tsukuru only had those 4 friends, so the shock he got was something that lingers with him throughout his life. And also, each of his friends' last names contains a color: red, blue, white, and black, except for Tsukuru. So this absence of color in his last name kind of represents how he has always viewed himself, that he does not have color, nor does he have anything to offer to the rest of the group, or even the world. So the major part of the book is Tsukuru's quest to find out why he was so harshly removed from his group of friends. And this journey is accompanied with the melody of a list called Homesickness from Years of Pilgrimage, which hints at the book's title. I'll put a friend somewhere on the screen because I don't know how to read it. And this melody kind of gives the book an atmosphere reminiscent of Norwegian Wood. I like the book because of its melancholic atmosphere, and the book was published in April 2013, which was spring in the Northern Hemisphere, so I decided I would also read this book in spring. I'd get out at around 4 a.m. and read and see the full moon gradually turning to waning crescent. I also like the discussion of names in the book, and I can also relate to the main character in many respects, including his relationship with his dad and, you know, his dark years of depression. And just such a personal book to me. I think it's quintessentially Murakami. Like, you've got some loose ends and, you know, it's like the same old thing, but this time I loved it. 4 stars. There's some kind of magic to Ishiguro's writing that just pulls me in. And the last 3 sentences of the book absolutely crushed me. And the reason why it's not a 5 stars is because some part of it is quite plotting, I'd say. So in the story, you follow Kathy H, who is 31 now, and she works as a carer for organ donors. And the story simply begins with the line, "My name's Kathy H." And that sets the tone for the rest of the story. It's like you're sitting down and having a one-sided conversation with a friend. And Kathy tells you about Hailsham, the school she went to, and Norfolk, which the students in her school call the Lost Corner of England, and her 2 best friends, Tommy and Ruth. Gradually, she reveals to you the unsettling realities of her life and the bleak future that she faces. And by telling you her story, you can see she's trying to, you know, come to terms with it by shutting down all her emotions, just like the quote I showed you at the beginning. To me, that's really tragic. She's fantasizing about something, but then she doesn't let her imagination go beyond a certain point. And that's exactly what I admire most about Ishiguro's writing. He uses a very calm and distinct voice to tell you a bone-chilling story, and he achieves this by using an emotionally stunted narrator. And finding out the reason why she talks like this is like at the heart of reading this novel. It's harrowing, and you really should go into the story blind without knowing anything more than what I've just said. Otherwise, it's gonna fall flat. That being said, I don't think there's like a huge plot twist that would make you gasp. It's more like a slow realization and then a shock that you come to terms with. And that leaves you thinking about how inhumane the world in which the characters live. I was first intrigued by the dystopian and sci-fi elements of the book, and as I read it, of course, I saw some disturbing consequences of biotechnology, but the more important theme is how love and friendship are fitted into the lives of the 3 main characters as they start to realize that time is short for them and mortality is a fact. And I'm not just throwing out love and friendship to overgeneralize here, because I think the book is discussing a pretty serious issue because many don't live with death in mind. The book was adapted into a film, and I found this video which was the final scene of the film, and I'll link it. Alright, I'm gonna go into spoilers, so please consider skipping this part if you want to read the book first. In the film, Kathy reflects,
"What I'm not sure about is if our lives have been so different from the lives of the people we save."
And this sentiment arises because most donors and carers have an average lifespan of around 30 years compared to the typical 70, 80 or 90 years. And I like to think the answer to Kathy's question is no, and I think actually Kathy is one of the lucky ones among her peers, among all the Hailsham students. From their education, they know that they will be donating their vital organs to people and have at most 20 more years to live. And the thing is, when a person has so few options to choose from, they naturally would be satisfied when they have little. And for those Hailsham students, happiness is really simple: to have their artwork get picked by Madame, to buy themselves something nice at the sales, to, you know, have a partner, to go on road trips, and to, you know, find their possibles. Things like the sales and the gallery represent the limit of their understanding of happiness, and they don't know what else to expect beyond those boundaries. They don't even try to look beyond them because the option of escape or rebellion never presented itself to them in the beginning, and that is why they don't rebel against their fate. It reminds me of Newspeak in 1984, because in this language, for example, free only has one meaning, which is free of charge, but not in the sense of, you know, freedom. And if you don't know it, if you don't know how good it is, then you won't desire it. And Kathy and her peers were never educated about escape. And I mentioned earlier that Kathy is the lucky one because she already has the thing that she always wanted. That is to have the person that she has always loved since her childhood to love her in return. And that's why when Kathy and Tommy are told by Madame that, you know, the deferral thing is just a rumor, Kathy isn't as crushed as Tommy. But yeah, those are my thoughts of the book. Let me know what you think. And And then I read The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which I rated 5 stars. I'm digressing a bit here, but I read some reviews online and half of them are from American high schoolers. So I'm just curious, like if you're from the States, did you study this book in school? I wish I had the chance to, but this is literally how I found out about the book. I'm gonna show you a clip.
僕のブドウで行こう
And that was from an anime show called Bungo Stray Dogs, and that's from the 2nd season. And I read the manga, so basically the author reimagined a bunch of famous authors from the 19th and the 20th century by depicting them with supernatural abilities based on their representative works. So for example, Dazai Osamu is in that manga, and his like supernatural ability is no longer human. And F. Scott Fitzgerald's is The Great Gatsby, and for John Steinbeck, it's obviously The Grapes of Wrath. And his character is based on the main character from this book, Tom Joad. And I really liked his character, so this book has been like on my TBR for like 6 or 7 years. Anyways, back to the book review. The story is set in Great Depression, and we follow the Joads, which is a family of poor tenant farmers who are forced from their Oklahoma home because of the drought and bank foreclosures. So the family, consisting of 12 people, along with the preacher, sets out for California, believing that they can settle down there by, you know, picking fruits or cotton or whatever. But obviously it's not going to be that easy for them. It's just I hadn't expected the level of hardship that lies ahead of them. And the entire story just left me with an annoying sense of dissatisfaction because every time there's a glimmer of hope, like they earn a little money or they meet someone on the road they can call family, the Joad family is forced to leave, whether it's because of the cops are messing with them or because they're just not making enough money or because of the climate. And this relentless cycle of infinitesimal hope and great despair is so dehumanizing and so hard to read because just as happiness is within their reach, everything is destroyed and the family has to start over again. It took me like a whole month to read this book. And Steinbeck, the author himself, visited the migrant camps and was horrified at what he saw. So he really wanted to present the brutality and monotony of migrant life in his fiction. And he wrote in a letter, "I've done my damnedest to rip a reader's nerves to rags. I don't want him satisfied." And that's exactly how I felt when I finished the book. I was like, that's it? Like it was so abrupt, but then it makes sense to like end the story in this way. If I were to describe this book with a tarot card, it would be 10 of Swords. You can see like there are 10 swords stabbing in the spine of this man. Probably the biggest reason why I gave this book 5 stars is because of the intercalary chapters. Basically, the novel follows a linear and chronological plot focusing on the Joad family as they journey from Oklahoma to California. And interspersed with the main plot are chapters that provide insight, social commentary, and background information. And these chapters don't directly follow the Joad family, but provide a broader perspective on the Dust Bowl, migrant workers, and the social injustice they face. It's like the narrator zooms in on one family and then zooms out to look at the whole society to deprecate capitalism and the environmental destruction it brings about, and how, you know, migrant workers like the Joad family are being exploited. And despite the exploitation, you can see how they still hold their heads high. And while the American dream is shattered on an individual level, the human spirit can still find hope and resilience in solidarity. But yeah, that's just some of my chaotic thoughts on the book. And this is my first John Steinbeck, so I definitely want to read more of him. And if you've read the book, let me know your thoughts. Alright, the next book is Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. And God, August was bleak because of the 3 books that I'm talking about. I've been reflecting on this book these days, and the more I think about it, the stronger my aversion to sensei grows. And sensei in Japanese means a teacher, but more generally, it's like an honorific term used to address someone with, you know, authority or expertise or respect in a particular field. So the story goes like this. One day, I, an unnamed protagonist and a university student, encounter an older man at a beach resort. By the way, I'm just going to use I when I refer to the protagonist because I don't want to keep saying protagonist 10 times. And because this man is with a foreigner, so I become interested in him and start spending time with him. And over time, I develop a deep admiration for him, so I start calling him sensei. Sensei is kind of an enigma because he has no friends, no job, and he lives with his wife in a pretty nice house with some maids because they've got money. Well, that's not what makes him mysterious, but he visits a grave every month. And as I continue to be in Sensei's company, I find out that he is quite a pessimist and misanthrope, naturally my curiosity about his past and the emotions that seem to torment him grows. I hope that Sensei will open up and reveal the depths of his inner turmoil. Sensei eventually promises me that he will tell me the complete story of his life. However, he chooses to do so in the form of a long suicidal note, which is about 160 pages long in this edition, and it's delivered to me after Sensei died. The revelation of Sensei's motivation for suicide is essentially the core of this book. It's revealed that Sensei had been deceived by his uncle, who unjustly took a significant portion of his inheritance, and this betrayal led Sensei to sever ties with his entire family. However, later, while this is not a spoiler, he did something equally, if not more terrible, to his one and only friend, and that made him realize that he was just as immoral as his uncle, who had made him a misanthrope in the first place, and that ultimately led to his decision to end his life. And there's a lot more going on in the book, and I just can't say anymore without spoiling the book, so it's a really bleak book. And I want to start my book review with the book title, which is Kokoro. So Kokoro means heart, and because the author just used, hiragana instead of kanji, the English translation just, Romanized it. And I mentioned why the book title is in hiragana instead of kanji in a different video, so if you want, you can check that one out. I'll link it. Many hearts are mentioned in this book, and this is, by the way, how you write heart in kanji. There's curiosity, ambition, contrition, and worst of all, egotism. Sensei's marriage with his wife is not a happy one because he conceals his past from her, and his wife can tell since they married that Sensei has been troubled by something, and just like the protagonist, she implores him to talk with her, but he just won't. In the story, various forms of human ego are depicted, but I think the worst form of human ego is what Sensei desires concerning his wife, which is to keep her in the dark about the truth about what he had done to his friend. Because in his defense, he doesn't want his past to taint his wife's pure, innocent heart. Essentially, he just wants her to remain the way he desires. And I was just furious reading this part because it may seem like he is being considerate of his wife, but like in reality, I wonder if he views her as an independent person. And his suicide is really a selfish act because after he died, who is his wife to depend on? Because her parents also died. One of the reasons why this book is a Japanese classic, apart from the cultural and historical aspects, is because of its exploration into human psyche. And I don't know if you can tell, but the shape, the forms of hiragana is more elegant than kanji. I suppose that's another reason why the book title is in hiragana, because it evokes a more emotionally rich imagery than kanji. Because typically you write it in Chinese character because it's easy to write. Anyways, that's Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. I'm going to combine the next two books together, which are Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber, and both are from Once Upon a Broken Heart series. And the final book in the series will be out on the 24th of October, which is just a day after my birthday. This is probably the first time I talk about YA fantasy romance books on this channel because, well, I never thought I'd enjoy this genre, but I should have known. I used to play a lot of, can't believe I'm saying this, but I used to play a lot of otome game on my PSP. Got this one 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And it's fundamentally, they are the same, right? I gave Once Upon a Broken Heart 4 stars and this one 5 stars. In the story, we follow Evangeline Fox, very cute, very bubbly, very sincere, and she has rose gold hair. And she craves a happily ever after. She has a boyfriend called Luke, but for some reason, her stepsister tells her that she and her boyfriend are gonna get married in a couple of days. So Evangeline immediately rushes to the church to beg the Prince of Hearts to help her stop the wedding because she believes that her boyfriend is, under some sort of trance. And by the way, the Prince of Hearts, aka Jax, is called a Fate, which is a demigod with a unique power, and he can control other people's emotions and minds. And apart from him, there are other fates. It's kind of like tarot card if you ask me. And he's described as tragically handsome, and although his kiss is fatal, it's still worth dying for. Oh my god, I can't believe I read this stuff. But anyways, so Evangeline and Jax have made a pact. He will help her, and in return, she needs to kiss 3 people whenever he asks. And Jax says in a line that I tapped, it's not a real kiss if there isn't any tongue. I just feel like I'm too old for this stuff. But it transpires that their arrangement gets Evangeline entangled with, other fates and a prince. And in fact, when Jax is asking for 3 kisses, he is actually secretly plotting something, and he actually wants more from Evangeline. But it's does he want more from Evangeline, or does he just want Evangeline. You need to read the books to find out. What I like about the two books is that they are not cheesy at all once you get past chapter 8 or 10 of the first book. And they exude a fairy tale charm, and I literally devoured the two books within 2 or 3 days. And Stephanie Garber's writing is so whimsical, and it almost like transports you to this magical land where the characters reside. Now let's talk about the romance in the story. Obviously, Jax is one of Evangeline's main love interests. He seems to like her, but he's cool enough to not let his feelings show. And this is what I was so invested in, the repressed feelings and the yearning. Oh my god. Throughout the story, especially in the Ballad of Never After, you can see the two characters, especially Jax, long for each other, knowing full well that they probably can't have each other, but still risk their lives for each other. I just couldn't take it anymore. You know, I am but a selfish person, and if I were the main character of a romance book, it'd probably end on page 1. So when I read the book and lived vicariously through the two characters, everything just melted my heart. The only complaint I have is the cliffhanger. It's so frustrating. I need to pre-order it on Audible so I can listen to it as soon as it's released. I also want to talk about the manga that I've been reading these days, which is Chainsaw Man. And you know, you can never be too old to read Shonen Jump. I used to think, especially after graduating high school, that I need to read less manga because unlike those protagonists, I'm not a high schooler forever. But then whenever I couldn't help it and read some manga, I just felt pumped and almost whole again because I grew up reading this stuff. I've always been viewing manga, especially Shonen Jump, not as a form of escapism, but a source of inspiration. And the madness, composure, self-sacrifice, and dedication that I saw from these characters of Chainsaw Man really helped me get through some tough days, like lately. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm gonna keep reading manga and talk about them in my future videos. And also, I just binged 12 episodes of Chainsaw Man. My goodness, the fighting scenes. I'm definitely watching those again. Also, I cried like 3 or 4 times watching it. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. And if you've made it so far, please leave me a comment. And yeah, I hope you have a pleasant rest of the week. And I will see you soon.